In the modern landscape of the animation world, it probably isn't controversial to say that, as a whole, anime is still unmatched as a storytelling medium. While Western animation is more often than not either marketed towards children or one-dimensional adult humor, anime has always been more comfortable with the idea of spanning different demographics, allowing for sprawling, imaginative stories that can exist in any genre for anyone. It's these open-ended creative possibilities and ability to both reach and create entire niches that's allowed it to find success all over the world. There are all sorts of fans of all sorts of series, and while two people may say that they like anime, there's a good chance their tastes are completely different. But there's one thing that seemingly unites all of us, one phrase that strikes fear into the hearts of every shonen captain, each isekai enjoyer, and the sum of slice-of-life supremacists. American live-action adaptation. The words alone bring back memories like war flashbacks of Scarlett Johansson, Light Turner, and the stink that still fills the room, Dragon Ball Evolution. Almost always, the failure of these projects is owed to a lack of care and understanding from those in charge of making them. These crews often view the source material as a framework for their own ideas on what would work as a product. Ideas that usually prioritize mass appeal over the creative integrity of a story, sacrificing things like culture, character, and overall style in favor of modernizing, Americanizing, or outright ignoring what made a series so appealing in the first place. To put it plainly, they're the wrong crew. But what would happen if you got the right crew? Producers that put faithful storytelling over marketability, stars that believed in what made their characters work in the first place, and writers that could not only identify what carries a work beneath the surface, but create stories that fit perfectly within those structures. In the late 2000s, these elements seemed to be the driving force behind a proposed live-action adaptation of anime's gold standard, Sunrise Inc.'s Cowboy Bebop. Led by actor Keanu Reeves, the film would have ambitiously tried to adapt not only the core plots of the 26-episode series, but its themes, mood, and atmosphere. Despite its solid heart and potential, the film would never see release, with Cowboy Bebop eventually getting a different kind of adaptation. In this video, I want to dig through the spaceship wreckage of this ill-fated project to see what this film could have been, why its passionate creators couldn't get it off the ground, and if ultimately it would have turned out better than this.
Please? No!
Today, we're looking at Fox's proposed Cowboy Bebop film, and all the ways it was roughed up. If you've never seen Cowboy Bebop, it's important to know that it's good. It's like really good. Since the moment it premiered in 1998, the show has received universal acclaim and has been nothing short of foundational in helping to build a worldwide fan base for anime as a whole.
20th Century TV was the best!
After broadcasting on WoW WoW and TV Tokyo, Bebop instantly resonated with audiences, with the show placing second in voting for Best Series in both the 1999 and 2000 Anime Grand Prix. Protagonist Spike Spiegel grabbed Best Male Character those same years. If you check any greatest of all time list to this day, you'll probably find Bebop near the top. Just ask IGN, Paste Magazine, and Men's Health? Okay. Its critical acclaim doesn't stop in Japan either. Overseas, Bebop Stub, starring Stephen Bloom, Bo Billingsley, and Wendy Lee, has come to be considered one of the best ever produced.
Back then it was the subs versus the dubs. But when Bebop came along, there was this groundswell. When a few people saw it and they realized that we really put a lot of love into it, and all of a sudden people were watching dubs for the first time that would never have considered it before.
It became the first anime series to premiere on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim in 2001, and was so well received that it became an ever-present staple of the network's action blocks, spending more time in the lineup than out of it in the 20 years since its original airing. Set in the year 2071, the mostly episodic series follows a team of bounty hunters in space who try to make ends meet by capturing criminals across the solar system. Its versatile action includes beautifully choreographed hand-to-hand combat, high-stakes shootouts, and spaceship dogfights. Its plots are dressed around the tropes of classic 20th century cinema, with strong noir overtones, and its atmosphere is something all its own, utilizing an iconic jazz and blues soundtrack set over a lo-fi sci-fi aesthetic, starring opaque and slowly developed characters, and dialogue that's nuanced and understated.
Jed, A bidet is a toilet that cleans out your asshole.
I said nuanced and understated. These are the elements that make Cowboy Bebop stand out as a series, but they're not exactly the elements that fit the mold of a typical Hollywood blockbuster. So when it was announced that Fox was adapting the show into a standalone live-action film, people probably had a right to be nervous. Development of the Cowboy Bebop movie was informally announced in July of 2008, when producer Erwin Stoff was asked about his future projects by IF Magazine while promoting NBC's Kings.
I'm developing Cowboy Bebop for Fox, but doing it as a live-action film, so I'm working on that at the moment. I'm really excited to be working on it, and it's in the really early stages. We just signed it the other day.
It's worth noting that this news came shortly after people got their first look at Dragon Ball Evolution, and with anime's most infamous adaptation freshly pressed into the minds and feelings of online communities, reactions to Cowboy Bebop receiving a similar treatment were mixed. But immediately, something was different. Stoff didn't mention changes needed to bring the property to American audiences, or a desire to conform to a Hollywood standard. In fact, he took the opposite approach, stating his love for the original series, as well as his willingness and ability to do something that stayed faithful to what made the original anime so appealing.
I have such an enormous admiration for its creators that our first and foremost concern is going to be a real degree of faithfulness to the tone of the movie, to the mix of genres. When I met with them in Japan, one of the first things that I brought up was the experience that we had on A Scanner Darkly, and how hard we worked to remain faithful to Philip K. Dick, and that was our big concern here.
While Stoff didn't mention anything about potential stars, writers, or directors for the project, fans were quick to connect dots on the producer's recent history. Stoff's filmography at that point included credits on movies like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Chain Reaction, Fleeing Minnesota, Devil's Advocate, The Matrix, The Replacements, Sweet November, Hardball, Constantine, The Lake House, Street Kings, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the aforementioned A Scanner Darkly. Right away, an obvious pattern presented itself. While the films themselves were an eclectic mix of remakes, adaptations, originals, rom-coms, dramas, and stoner comedies, one thing seemed to unite just about every project Stoff took on: Keanu f***ing Reeves.
You're breathtaking!
Attention immediately turned to Reeves, who wasted no time confirming his involvement when asked about the possibility of a Bebop feature film.
Oh yeah, cool. We're trying to do that. We're taking the Red Eye story, the beginning part of the series, and then we'll deal with the end of the series. We're trying to figure out what pieces to put together to tell one story. Because it's such a short form, to make a 2-hour version will be tough. And it's got so much of an origin story obligation. You've got to get people up to speed, but you don't want to do too much of that. There are a lot of things to take into consideration, but we think we can do something good.
Reeves had no problem showcasing his enthusiasm for the source material, as well as a desire to tell a complete story that leveraged the most essential elements of Bebop's overarching plot. He was excited about the possibilities, and when he was reminded that it would be a challenge to adapt a world-famous series with both a heavily stylized story and hordes of devoted fans, Reeves simply smiled and said, "Yeah, but that's why you want to do it." If the passion from Reeves wasn't clear, just compare his comments on a movie he hadn't even been cast in to the man who would eventually star in another live-action Bebop project, John Cho. In a GQ profile promoting the upcoming release of the Netflix Cowboy Bebop series, Cho notably avoided talking about the show, preferring instead to talk about anti-vax NBA players, before admitting he only took the part of main character Spike Spiegel to see if he could handle a leading action role. In an interview with IGN, Cho would struggle to even name a favorite episode.
What was your favorite episode?
I'm trying to think of a couple of moments, I'll say. Two of my favorite moments is the,
Despite his enthusiasm, it's worth noting that the involvement of Reeves wasn't actually seen as great news at the time. 15 years ago, the actor wasn't the lovable, charismatic cult hero he is today. Instead, he was reviled for his monotone acting approach, and the most likable thing about him was the sad Keanu meme. He couldn't create the same instant excitement he was capable of in later years, and in spite of his good intentions, people still weren't optimistic. In January of 2009, Keanu would be confirmed for the role of Spike, with the announcement also including the reveal of the film's writer, novelist Peter Craig. Today, Craig is best known as the screenwriter of the Hunger Games Mockingjay films, The Town, and co-writer of 2022's The Batman. But at the time, he had no Hollywood releases to his name, and was only known for mystery thriller novels The Martini Shot, Hot Plastic, and Bloodfather. While he lacked the history of an accomplished screenwriter, he had no shortage of pedigree for something like Cowboy Bebop. In an interview about his involvement with the film, Craig not only stressed his qualifications for the project, but just like Stoff and Reeves, would go on to describe his fandom for the source material and desire to do it justice.
I earned a decent reputation for writing certain kinds of characters. Disaffected men, dysfunctional families, poker-playing con women, weathered ex-cops. Even though I'd never written sci-fi, Emma Watts and Erwin Stoff really believed that I might relate well to Spike, Faye, and Jet, as well as many of the minor characters from the episodes. When I heard I might have a chance for the job, I was thrilled. I liked the pace of Cowboy Bebop, the wide-open space. I liked the extremely droll sense of humor. It was unlike anything I'd seen before. I've probably watched every episode at least 3 or 4 times now, and I really adore what a complete world Watanabe and Nobumoto created. Every character was new and interesting, and I felt like I was looking at an encyclopedia of some imaginary world.
Craig also elaborated on the crew's relationship with Sunrise and their involvement in the film, highlighting the instant chemistry between both groups, especially Reeves and Shinichiro Watanabe, the series director.
They're very much involved. I met with all of them in Tokyo in December, at a long meeting with Keanu in the room. I thought there was an immediate rapport between all of us, particularly Shinichiro Watanabe and Keanu. I asked questions, presented scenarios, and they were very specific about their vision for the series and how it might convert to a live-action film. They've continued to be in touch since then, and last month I received a very detailed letter, which I've consulted regularly.
It's hard to overstate how different this was from the norm. For example, Watanabe would have almost no involvement with the future Netflix series.
Did you get any advice from the director of the anime, Watanabe, stepping into the role of such an iconic anime character?
We did not communicate, but yeah, it was, I mean, we're not done.
In January of 2009, Stoff offered his first update on the film, saying the script was still in progress, but that he was hopeful to begin production sometime in 2010. Additionally, it was stated that Watanabe had been attached as an associate producer, with Stoff reaffirming the film would be an origin story and that he believed it would feature a racially diverse starring cast. As all the pieces came together, it was becoming clear that Fox's Cowboy Bebop film had the potential to rise above the internet skepticism and could become the exception to the rule of live-action American adaptations. It had a producer who was dedicated to remaining faithful to the series, an actor that reveled in the challenge of getting things right, and a writer with all the qualifications to make it happen. It had something that no other American adaptation ever seemed to find. It had the right crew. Still, the chance existed that it was all just empty platitudes. Maybe their fandom was orchestrated, maybe their favorite moments were rehearsed PR responses. And with the movie never getting made, it's possible that even if they were as passionate as they claimed to be, they were just never able to find an idea that worked, right? Well, wrong, actually. A script for the film, written by Craig and dated from April 2009, makes good on every promise made by the emerging writer, featuring sci-fi heavy interplanetary action, short, witty dialogue, and a plot that includes the Red Eye drug, the Red Dragon Syndicate, Spike's love interest Julia, his climactic battle with rival character and overall antagonist Vicious, and even a subplot covering Jet Black's police past. Craig's script almost perfectly condenses the characters, worlds, and stories of Cowboy Bebop into a standalone film. The script begins with Vicious being broken out of a mining prison in the dead of space, with minor characters Asimov, Uday Taxum, and Wang Long adapted into the crew assisting in his escape. The action includes explosions, interplanetary freighters, and bodies freezing from exposure to the cold of space. As it all happens, Vicious calmly recites the oath of the Syndicate while the chaos unfolds around him. After the rescue, Asimov pulls off from the space mining site, and Vicious incinerates everyone left at the prison camp, removing his spacesuit to let his long hair float freely in zero gravity. Asimov and the rest of Vicious's crew respond in shock, fearing repercussions for killing prisoners of other syndicates. When they ask Vicious why he did it, he simply responds,
"It's how I say goodbye."
This is the first scene of the film, and already it's fantastic, it's intimidating, and it's a far cry from whatever this is.
Mushy mushy.
From there, the script is a combination of plots and moments pulled from Asteroid Blues, Black Dog Serenade, Heavy Metal Queen, Ballad of Fallen Angels, and the Real Folk Blues. Taking place after Spike, Jet, and Faye are already working together, the overall story focuses on Vicious's takeover of the Red Dragon Syndicate and his relationship with Spike, which is changed to make them both adoptive brothers raised under Mao Yen Rai. A huge range of supporting characters from the series also make appearances in cameos, including Shin, VT, Roko, and Jet's former partner Fad, though it does leave out Ed, and probably for the better.
Spike Spiegel!
After recognizing Asimov from a news story about the jailbreak, Spike, who's revealed as the rightful heir of the Syndicate's leadership, chases down Vicious and searches for Julia, all the while fending off bounty hunters coming after a massive price that's been placed on his head. The script's climax leans heavily on the last 2 episodes of the series. Spike and Julia reunite, but Julia is killed in a shootout with Vicious's men. Spike tracks down his adoptive brother, while Jet ends up in a confrontation with his former ISSP partner, who's revealed to have been responsible for the incident that cost Jet his arm, as well as the bounty placed on Spike. Its biggest divergence from the anime is its ending. In the script, Spike and Vicious both survive their final confrontation, with Spike rejecting leadership of the Syndicate. Jet programs a bounty for Vicious into Big Shot's database, and the group brings him in to collect on the reward. Unfortunately, due to the destruction caused by Vicious along the way, the police can't actually pay out on his bounty while they focus on repairs, and the Bebop crew ends where they began. Alive, together, and broke, playing poker as Spike flickers between the past and the present. It was an ambitious take on the series, and while it may have ended up a bit crowded with how much it tried to fit in plot-wise, the real strength of the treatment was in its tone. Craig touches on the themes of Cowboy Bebop almost flawlessly, capturing its neo-noir essence, its moody characters, and its tense action with pitch-perfect accuracy. Spike is still hopelessly caught between the past and the present. Jet is still the exasperated dad friend cleaning up each mess his crew leaves behind. And Faye is still profiteering, rambunctious, and disruptive without ever veering into flat-out annoying. The script clocks in at 122 pages, and you'd be hard-pressed to look through a single one and not find something that feels like it could fit snugly into the framework of the original anime. Craig's work can't help but gush over his clear love for the source material, adapting not only the series' biggest moments, but also some of its smallest.
It needs to be repaired.
Faye, I told you I'd fix it.
I mean your arm. Reconstructive surgery? It doesn't cost that much these days, you know?
This ship is my ship, and this arm is my arm. I don't need instructions.
One of my personal favorite scenes comes after Spike gets slapped with a gargantuan 400 million Wulong bounty. Following the revelation, Faye enters his cabin and watches him work out. Without knowing what he's done, and only what he's worth, she sees a new magnetism and mystery in who he could be. While she appears flirtatious, Spike cuts through to the underlying root of her interest, that his bounty could pay off her debts. Faye then brings up the first of Jet's rules for working on the Bebop, implying, but never outright stating, that it bars any of them from ever hooking up, and asks Spike if he's ever thought about the two of them together. Coolly, Spike says, "Oh, I've thought about it. I think about everything that might kill me." It's moody, it's tense, it's succinct, but most of all, it feels like Cowboy Bebop. From the moment pre-production started, everyone involved could only talk about getting it right and keeping it faithful, and Craig's script was the perfect foundation for building toward those goals. So it should be no surprise that with eager producers, an engaged star, and a script capturing every element that made the original series so engaging, this marked the point where Fox's Cowboy Bebop film completely fell apart. After Craig completed his draft, the news cycle on Cowboy Bebop suddenly went silent. As time went on with no word on casting, filming, or even delays, the film's rumored 2011 release date and its release as a whole began to seem less and less realistic. Stoff's production duties continued with Water for Elephants, Beautiful Creatures, and an executive producer role on Keanu Reeves' 47 Ronin. During that time, however, he offered no updates about Bebop's progress. Reeves himself wasn't much different, with his initial excitement soon turning to skepticism about the film's potential costs. In a 2010 interview with Collider, Reeves would state the following:
"I haven't heard anything back. They turned in the script and it was very expensive. It would cost like $500 million to make that script. So I don't know where it's at right now."
A similar problem plagued the previously released Dragon Ball Evolution, where revisions to the script saw entire characters written out, such as Krillin and Oolong, just to keep costs down on shooting. And given how that film performed, Fox themselves probably weren't eager to give extra money to a project that fans would probably hate on principle anyway. Bebop would enter rewrites in an attempt to lower its budget, but not long after his $500 million remark, Reeves would further emphasize issues with the project's cost. When asked about where the film was by MTV News at a promotional event for Henry's Crimes, Reeves groaned before answering,
"Nowhere. It hasn't been working. Every time the script comes back, it's still $1 gazillion. Every time they try to pare it down, it's like, well, that's not the film. What about the other kajillion?"
He also admitted his own reluctance to continue on the movie, feeling that at 46, he was getting too old to play Spike. But Keanu's comments didn't go uncontested. In October of 2010, executive producer Joshua Long was interviewed by Anime News Network and pushed back against the idea of a hyperinflated budget.
Now, where is this project right now? Because it was in the news recently, as in terms of Keanu saying, well, it's a $500 million script, and no one wants to take that kind of a risk right now. Is that true? What's really going on there?
I don't speak for him. I think I read the interview, and I think throwing around the term $500 million is more of a way to be funny. It is a very expensive movie. I mean, it's a big movie. It's certainly not $500 million. I think that was a way to throw out a large number. I think people probably misinterpreted what he said, and it might have caused a little bit of a stir, but it shouldn't cause any alarm to anybody.
So it's not like now the movie isn't being made because Keanu said that.
Absolutely not. And I know that wasn't his intent. Again, I don't speak for him, but I think he was there doing a junket for another movie. I know he gets asked about this a lot because obviously it's a very important title, but it might have been just, don't ask me any more questions about Bebop. I think that might have been it. So
yeah, that's just a reason.
People shouldn't read into it. It was picked up a lot in the Japanese press, and they kind of misinterpreted the $500 million phrase. That's kind of a colloquial phrase that we use when how expensive, it's a $500 million, so I think it was just misinterpreted. So I wouldn't read anything into it.
Long also hinted at major revisions to the script, including the addition of Edward, who wasn't present in Craig's original draft.
So, can you tell us what characters are actually in the script? Like who's in there and who's not?
I guess all of them.
And even Ed and Nine, they're in there?
Yes.
Really? Huh. I think the common wisdom was, there's no way they're going to try and fit those characters in there.
Well, it's funny. They're comic relief, which is really necessary. I mean, for the Bebop crew is very funny. I mean, Jet is hilarious. He doesn't mean to be, but he is. And, Spike is just in his own way. But it is really those two characters that add some fun to it. Because at the end of the day, it is a very lighthearted, fun adventure. It is not super serious. And I think that's what's exciting about it.
Long seemed optimistic and gave hope that the project was still in the works. That hope may have stretched a bit further, if not for the fact that this would be the last thing anyone heard about the Cowboy Bebop film for nearly 3 years. 2011 came and went, with Fox's Bebop film never receiving any trailers, teasers, posters, or even any updates about its production. It wouldn't be until 2013 that Watanabe would state something was in the works, but elaborated that the details were a secret. Unfortunately, Reeves would double down on his worries regarding Bebop in a Reddit AMA later that year, again stating that the film would cost $500 million and that any project that did happen would likely be without his involvement. Suddenly, the crew that set out to make something great seemed like it would end up making nothing at all. Its once ecstatic star was slowly distancing himself from anything that could still happen. The numerous scripts from its talented and invested writer were being rejected at every iteration, and by 2014, Watanabe himself would change his stance from a certainty that something was happening soon to not being sure if anything was happening at all.
I'm afraid I don't know what they're thinking in Hollywood. Apparently, the project hasn't come to a stop, but I don't know how it's going to progress from here on. I hear that there are a lot of Hollywood problems.
Watanabe's pessimism marked the final mention of Fox's version of Bebop, and by 2017, the rights to the series were acquired by Tomorrow Studios, who elected to make a live-action television show instead of a standalone film. The results were...
I love this place. You know they have bidets in the bathroom? Damn things are addictive.
Please tell me you're talking about the bread.
Quite therapeutic. Yeah. And that gentle warm water really eases the stress while washing out the nooks and crannies.
Stop. Bacon.
None of Craig, Stoff, or Reeves would be part of the show's final cast or crew, and the people that took their place lacked the passion or potential of the ill-fated film from the very start. A Spike Spiegel who could name episodes and got along famously with the series director was replaced by one who openly admitted to never seeing the series or talking to Watanabe. A head producer who made faithfulness his top priority became a showrunner more concerned with updating the story and dropping Easter eggs than simply getting things right. And instead of a writer who was capable of perfectly translating Bebop's noir overtones, Netflix's series was headed by one who had more experience with the quippy, bombastic stylings of the MCU. The series went on to receive a response that was lukewarm at best, with fans seeing it as a poor translation and even poorer understanding of the source material. While the actors tried to dismiss these criticisms as a vocal minority of trolls, it's hard to argue when Watanabe himself couldn't even make it through the first scene. He'd talk about how his suggestions for the series were likely ignored by the Adaptation's creators, marking the most glaring difference between the people that wanted to do it and the ones that actually did. Netflix's Cowboy Bebop, despite being greenlit for 2 seasons, was quickly cancelled after 1. The surprised reactions from those that worked on it only served to highlight what most fans knew from the start, that this was always the wrong crew. What did get made left a sour taste in the mouths of Cowboy Bebop's fans and its creators, and for the few savvy enough to know of the project they missed out on in its stead, served as a bitter reminder of what could have been. Those involved in Fox's Cowboy Bebop film go on to find success with other projects. Erwin Stoff has continued in production, working on Edge of Tomorrow, Unbroken, and Call of the Wild. Keanu Reeves would go on to star in the massively successful JOHN WICK series, and has since seen himself turn into a Hollywood favorite, with his name now serving as a unifying point of fanfare instead of derision. And Peter Craig would arguably go on to be more successful than either of them in his respective field, earning writing credits for The Batman, Top Gun: Maverick, and Bad Boys for Life, cementing himself as one of the most accomplished screenwriters of the past decade. They've never spoken openly about the death of Cowboy Bebop, but given their individual talents and the potential of what they were working with, it's probably safe to say the project stands as the biggest bounty they'll never get to cash in. There's no getting around the rules of the Hollywood machine. It's a calculated, cutthroat world whose list of casualties are as long as its successes, and Fox's Cowboy Bebop may have always been doomed to fall to the former before it got a chance to be the latter. The ambition of Craig's script was ultimately too grand for its own good, and unfortunately, that was probably never going to change. To do it right would have likely cost as much as one of the Avatar movies, with a ceiling that was always going to be much, much lower. Even if it maintained its tone through its numerous rewrites, the action and scope could have never worked with a smaller budget. And with the expectations for adapting a work as iconic as Bebop, there's no way to do things half right. No matter how popular the series is, live-action anime adaptations will always be seen as a gamble by the people who pay for them to be made. The largest budget to date for a film based on anime and manga was $150 million for Battle Angel Alita, a passion project that James Cameron himself spent nearly 20 years trying to get made. While it definitely helps to have creators who are passionate about doing justice to the source material, it'll always come down to what's doable within the scope of the budget and the people providing it. Nobody could make a great Dragon Ball film with less money than it took to do Halloween Ends. It's impossible to keep what makes Death Note great when you're told you have to Americanize it. And even with the right crew in place, you can't make Cowboy Bebop without $500 million behind it. In an ideal world, Fox's Bebop would have released in 2011, exactly how it was imagined, and would have been heralded as the new standard of a perfect American adaptation. But in our world, there was no chance of it ever being filmed in the way it was written, and even if it somehow found its way to theaters, it would have never made it there without being roughed up.